Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurship Unboxed, your front row seat to the stories, struggles, and secrets behind today's most innovative startups, founders, entrepreneurs, and investors. I'm your host, AJ. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing a remarkable individual who has significantly impacted the business world. Our guest is Callum Laing, an investor, entrepreneur, and founder of the Veblen Director Program. He's also the author of Boardroom Blueprint, Boost Your Career with a Board Seat in 60 Days, and the former CEO and chair of MBH Corporation PLC. Callum has been involved in over 100 M&A transactions, creating $500 million in shareholder value. He's a best-selling author, advisor to multiple boards, and the host of the Callum Connects micro podcast. Welcome, Callum.
Yeah, thank you. Really looking forward to it.
Welcome to the show, Callum. Give us the 60-second backstory on the Veblen Director Program. How'd you get the idea, and what was your career before taking the entrepreneurial leap?
So I think I've kind of been an entrepreneur for most of my life. I grew up in the UK and had a relatively poor background, and so I was always hustling, trying to make a little bit of extra side income. I kind of started working for the local pubs, cleaning at the weekends, and then I think I had a car washing little venture for a while, which was really cold in winter. Didn't like that at all. And yeah, it sort of kind of evolved from that, just really trying to figure out different ways to build income streams. And so my first grown-up business was a recruitment company at the height of the dot-com boom. So I was in the tech industry. And at the height of the dot-com boom, all the European telcos were really struggling to catch up with the American telcos in terms of getting the internet infrastructure in place. And I knew all of the key people. And so I set up a recruitment company to put me and my friends into various telcos around Europe, which was very successful. We were young and overpaid and having a lot of fun. But then, of course, the dot-com bubble burst. And yeah, that was my first real experience of some of the challenges that come with entrepreneurship. But yeah, once you've started with entrepreneurship, it's very difficult to go back to being an employee. So I've sort of stuck with it ever since. Now my kind of day job is I put together groups of small businesses. So I find other people's successful businesses and I put them together under public listco holding companies. And then I have a few other sort of side businesses that all support that. So I help people get their first board seats. So I have a company called Veblen Director Program, which helps people get their first board seats. I have another program which helps people to become kind of rainmakers and learn how to raise investment capital. So yeah, kind of keeps me busy, keeps me out of trouble mostly. So Veblen Director Program started about 18 months ago, and that was really a reaction to a lot of the boards that I was sitting on or I ended up advising. I realized that they were oftentimes quite dysfunctional, and oftentimes people were on those boards for the wrong reasons. They were very kind of self-absorbed, not really thinking about the wider stakeholders. And there was a lot of very talented people that were being overlooked because they didn't look the right way, or they were the wrong gender, or they hadn't gone to the right schools. And that was really frustrating for me. Like I like to get the right people into the right roles. And so the whole board kind of infrastructure over the last 100 years has been very exclusive. And companies were actually really struggling. The boards weren't up to the task needed in this fast-growing environment that we live in, or this fast-changing environment. And so, yeah, I put together a program to help people learn what they need to learn at a very practical level. So there's courses out there that are kind of like Institute of Directors, how you get a director's certificate and those kind of things. But basically what they teach is good corporate governance for the biggest companies in the world, basically. So they'll look at a Fortune 500 company, they'll look at what is good corporate governance, and they'll teach board members or aspiring board members how to do that. The problem is, if you try and apply good corporate governance, big company, good corporate governance to a small company, you'll kill it. It's just irrelevant to a small company. Small companies need to be very nimble. They need board directors that are not based on theory, but are actually out there helping you, introducing you to investors, connecting you, making partnerships, making stuff happen. And that's what small companies need from their boards. And ironically, those big companies, which you wouldn't get into anyway, you're not going to get a board seat at an S&P 500 company unless you've got 10, 20 years of board experience. And the last thing they need is somebody with a certificate for good corporate governance, because those big boards have all of the legal advisors and everything else that they need. So they, like anyone else, they actually hire board members based on the value that they can bring. And it's not about having a nice piece of paper saying that you deserve a certificate. So yeah, the program was really designed around helping people get onto that first, get their first board seat and get onto that board ladder so they can then progress from there.
Absolutely. We are going to stick on building boards for entrepreneurs. What are the top 3 benefits of having a board for startups, and how can it change the trajectory of a company?
Yeah, good question. So there's 330 million companies in the world, and less than 1% of them have an active board. And yet every single successful company you can think of has an active
1%.
board. Yeah, less than 1%. It's crazy. But if you think about it, like if you think about the companies you know, the entrepreneurs you know, how many of them actually have boards? Most of them don't. And the reason is that for most small business owners, most entrepreneurs think that a board is something that you do when you're much bigger. They think it's expensive, it's hard to put together. And actually what we do is we say, look, you should be starting almost as soon as you have an idea. So if I have an idea for a new business, the first thing I do is I put the advisory board together before I even get my first client or hire my first staff, because they can save me so much time. It doesn't need to cost anything. So when I set up an advisory board for a company, normally what I say is, look, I can't afford to pay you. It's a brand new business or it's a young business. I just want to connect with you once a month for about an hour, just get your advice on a couple of questions. And look, if it works out and the business is growing, then I'd love to bring you on in a more formal structure. But if it doesn't work out, no harm, no foul. And actually what you find is there's a lot of people that would love to work in that environment, to get some experience. I find a lot of executives in big companies, they love the idea of sitting on an advisory board because it gives them a chance to live vicariously through your entrepreneurial journey, which oftentimes they want to do, but for whatever reason haven't yet pulled the trigger. So it's a nice tool. And look, the reality is that when you're a small business, you need all the help you can get. So if you can get somebody that basically becomes an advocate for you, somebody that could potentially introduce you to new clients, introduce you to investors, and just hold you accountable, it's actually really, really valuable. So I'm a big believer. Not only am I a big believer that every entrepreneur should put together a board of advisors, I'm also a huge believer that every entrepreneur should sit on the board of another company. And normally the pushback you get around that is, oh, hang on, I'm already working 24/7 on my own company. Like I haven't got time to sit on somebody else's board and help them. But actually, I'd say you have to. You really need to, because what happens is, and I speak from a lot of experience, is when you are an entrepreneur and you're working 24/7, you're head down, you're in the weeds. You're often not able to think strategically because you've got payroll due, you've got a supplier that needs to be paid, you've got clients that haven't paid. Like you're dealing with all these fires all of the time. You know that your entire business is held together with chicken wire and masking tape. And yet when you look at other people's business, it always looks so smooth and it always looks so good and like they've got everything figured out. So one of the advantages of going and sitting on the board of somebody else's company is, first of all, you discover that all businesses are held together with chicken wire and masking tape. So like all businesses are creaking at the seams. But what you see is that they've solved some of your problems in a way that you haven't thought of. And you've probably solved some of their problems in a way that they hadn't thought of. And so you can just tell them, one or two things that will really unlock a lot of value for them and make you an incredible, valuable board member. But it would just give you a lot of confidence. And it also, one of the things that you struggle with, especially as a young entrepreneur or in the early days of your business, is credibility.
Yeah.
Generally, big companies don't like doing business with startups because they have a very high failure rate and they don't have a lot of credibility. So if you can say, hey, look, I run this company, but I also sit on the board of one or two other companies, that immediately gives you a massive credibility push. And that helps with recruiting staff. It helps with landing clients, helps with raising capital. So, I think it's a hugely valuable thing for all entrepreneurs to look at.
That great perspective. I never looked at it that way. Could you share a story where a board's guidance was pivotal in navigating a startup through a challenging phase?
Yeah, so let me. So I run. If anyone's interested in this, the program's called Veblen Directors. There's a website called veblendirectors.com, and I do a webinar fairly regularly about the process, and it's a free webinar. Anyone can join. I did one about a year ago, and a gentleman reached out to me from. I think it was Atlanta in the US. And he reached out and said, look, this sounds amazing, but I'm 70 years old. I might be a bit too old for this. But he'd been a successful entrepreneur. He'd now retired. He was looking to give back and share his wisdom. So we brought him into the program. We taught him how to kind of connect with other companies and how to build his profile. And he started working with three different young companies. One of them was in Europe, and it was a food and beverage company. And he sat in on his first board meeting with them and really liked what they did. He said, look, I love what you're doing. I think I can really help. But if I'm going to get, I can help as an advisor. I can give you an hour of my time every month. But I think I can do more than that. I think I can help you take your revenue from next to nothing up to a very high number. And if I do that, would you be open to giving me a slice of equity and a slice of the revenue that I bring in? Now, for the entrepreneur in Europe, this is an easy thing to say yes to. Like giving away something in the future. It's very easy. And bear in mind, like most people never actually deliver on the things they promise. So this was very easy for the company to say yes to. What Keith did, the guy in America, he picked up the phone to his best mate from school who, they'd been friends for 50 plus years. And his best mate runs a huge food and beverage company in the US. And he said, hey, look, I've just found you a European distributor for your drinks. And because his friend knew him, trusted him, said, yep, make it happen. And so immediately Keith was able to connect those two companies to set up a European arm for the US business. And look, that will be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to Keith. But for the startup, for the early business in Europe, completely changed the trajectory of the business. Just amazing. And like that's one person, one connection, one story, and we've got hundreds of them. It's really amazing how quickly it can escalate.
That's fascinating. I wish on my startups I had something like that.
I mean, not all of them are as dramatic, but you just think about it though. Like if you reached out to 4 or 5 people and asked them just to be advisors for you, for your business, it's 4 or 5 more people. They've all got hundreds of connections. They've all got experience. One thing that they say to you can save you spending 2 years going down a dead alley. Or just one connection can bring you a new client. So look, to me, it's a really sort of obvious no-brainer, and it was something that I learned as a young entrepreneur. Like at the time, I didn't know it was an advisory board. I used to just I would find entrepreneurs that were older and wiser than me, and I would go and bribe them with a lunch every now and then and try and learn as much as I could from them. But that kind of ultimately, I ended up formalizing that into sort of a board of advisors. And also when it came to raising capital, I remember when I was learning to raise capital and I kind of did what everybody else did. I had a nice pitch deck. I went and knocked on doors and it got rejected by everyone. And I realized that, despite what you see on sort of Dragon's Den and those kind of shows, Shark Tank, that's not how the real world works. Like nobody invests in somebody that just cold knocks them and does a pitch. You need to have these trusted relationships. And so what I did was I went and I found somebody at Microsoft, somebody at Yahoo, not senior people, like board middle managers that like they're nothing special about them at all. They were lovely people, but they were just somewhere stuck in the middle of Microsoft. And I said, hey, look, do you want to join my advisory board? It's not going to, like, I can't pay you, but just an hour a month of your time. And by the way, like once a quarter, I'll get you together with the other advisors and we'll buy you lunch and you can get to know each other. And everyone kind of leapt at that. And what it meant for me, I wasn't expecting them to give me particularly good advice. But what it meant was when I went out, I could say, when I was talking to people, I could say, hey, I've got Microsoft, Yahoo, ended up with Google, like on my board. And like suddenly the credibility that you get
is high.
Exactly. So I was leveraging off the brands of where they worked. And interestingly, when I did come, so I never asked them for money. What I did is I invited them to be my advisor. Every week I would send them a little email report. They didn't ask for it. They probably didn't want it. But every week I'd say, hey, this is what I've done this week. These are the actions I've taken. These are the results I've got. And then at the end of about 3 months, I got them all together for lunch. And I said, look, it's been going really well. You've been getting the weekly reports, but I really need to raise some capital. I don't know how to raise capital. Does anyone have any ideas? 2 of them said, I'll write you a check for 50 grand. Because by then they knew me, they trusted me, they saw that I was making progress. And the other ones were like, well, I can't do that, but I can introduce you to somebody that I know is sort of has got money in this space, is interested in these products. And there's a huge difference between the guy from Microsoft introducing you to an investor because he's sitting on a company, sitting on the board of a company, whereas me just going and cold knocking. So yeah, it's a really, really valuable tool to helping with raising capital as well.
Wow, that's a great strategy that I will be using this strategy from now on.
Awesome. Well, look, I'll send you a copy of my book as well, which is Boardroom Blueprint, which talks all about this.
How does serving on another company's board complement an entrepreneur's journey, and what unique perspectives does it offer?
Yeah, look, I think, apart from the things we've already discussed about kind of seeing the way other companies deal with things, I think it puts you in an environment where oftentimes you're not the smartest person on somebody else's board. So you're learning from other people. You're having very high level conversations. Like you should be talking about strategy and things like that rather than sort of day-to-day operations. And as an entrepreneur, you're always kind of stuck in day-to-day operations. And as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to kind of be there for everyone. Like your employees come to you with problems, like your family comes, like you're just constantly trying to fix stuff for everyone else and having to roll up your sleeves and get in there and do it. And when you sit on the board, it's much more about strategic, and you don't actually, like, you can see the problems in the company. You can see how they can be fixed. As a board, you talk about the best strategies, but you don't have to implement it. That's what the executives do. So it's, I find like the connections that I've made on boards have been some of the most powerful connections that I've got, and people that become friends with and done deals with many, many years after we've sort of left those boards. And it's just it's a very good network to be connected to. And it can be incredibly lucrative as well.
Great. Let's dive into small business mergers and acquisitions. What are the key factors to consider when looking at acquiring a competitor or a supplier?
So it's such a broad topic.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint-hearted, but there's a lot to be said for it. If you think about most typical growth paths for company comes from organic growth, like you're just growing sales, and so it tends to be a pretty incremental year on year. If you acquire a company, you can double the size of your company in the space of an afternoon, basically. Like signing that one contract means you're now responsible for twice the number of clients, twice the number of staff, and twice the amount of challenges and fires. So, and sometimes combining yours and theirs makes it even worse. So there are some hurdles, but I think it's a useful. I mean, it's such a fundamental part of business. If you follow the business press, you kind of see that companies grow and then they get acquired and then they merge with another company and all these things sort of happen. So it's sort of on that entrepreneurial to-do list is to start to understand how M&A, mergers and acquisitions, works. I mean, probably the way to get started is just something relatively small and easy. So, for example, if you are working with a supplier, a small supplier, you like working with them, they're easy to work with, it's a 2 or 3 man band, it's relatively easy to strike a deal with them for them to come underneath your umbrella and work underneath your umbrella and share some costs so both companies become more profitable. And with those smaller businesses, it should be relatively easy. I mean, the reality is it actually gets easier back at so it's sort of the bigger the companies are, the harder it gets, and then it gets easier again, because once you start to get into the really big companies, they have all the systems and processes defined. You don't kind of run into at small business level, you can often get into kind of ego battles between the two founders and those sort of things. My business partner, Jeremy Harbour, has been running the Harbour Club for 15 years. And that's basically teaches people how to do no money down deals. So often acquiring distressed companies and how you do that safely. I'm not a fan of distressed companies. So I like successful companies. But look, it's for people that like fixing stuff. That's a great strategy as well. So it's a useful tool for entrepreneurs to be aware of.
Speaking of growth strategies, could you walk us through the process of identifying a competitor or supplier as a potential acquisition target?
Yeah, look, we don't proactively go, and we do about an acquisition a month, so 10 to 12 acquisitions a year. We never go out looking for them. They tend to come to us because, I mean, we've been doing this for a while, so we sort of have the reputation. But equally, I think some of the best deals you do are kind of opportunistic. Sometimes if you go out looking for a deal and the company that you're looking to buy knows that you want the deal more than they want the deal, then that's a rubbish negotiating position to be in. So once kind of word spreads that you're potentially acquisitive, then what happens is companies tend to come to you, and then you can kind of pick and choose and go for the ones that you sort of get a good feel for. I think, this is kind of a controversial opinion. People tend to get very hung up on, I've got to do lots and lots of due diligence. I've got to bring lawyers and accountants in and pour through the books and make sure there's no skeletons in the cupboard. Every small business has skeletons in the cupboard.
Definitely.
And also, it doesn't matter how good your DD team is. If a company wants to hide something from you, they're going to hide something from you. I mean, JP Morgan just paid whatever it was, 120 billion for a company that had made up 3/4 of its customers. If Enron was able to keep fraud under the noses of Arthur Andersen and your team isn't going to be able to uncover fraud. But so kind of with that said, I tend to say, well, look, if the fundamentals of the deal make sense, let's move quickly. Let's put some caveats in place that if something turns out not to be what we expected, we can unwind the deal or we can do things. But one of the advantages that you have as a small company is you can move quickly. And not only will private equity not play in the space of small businesses, because it's like that private equity will typically spend $200,000 on due diligence. And it costs the same whether that's 1 million revenue company or a 100 million revenue company. And so they obviously can't recover their profits. They can't recover their costs on a $1 million company. So they just don't play in that space, which gives you an opportunity where the professionals don't tread. And so that's valuable. One of the games that private equity plays is what they call deal fatigue. And it's a very, very powerful negotiating tactic. So they would come to you, AJ, they'd say, yeah, look, we think your company's worth $10 million. And you go, wow, awesome, great, let's do this deal. So there's kind of a letter of intent, and you're all very excited. You've already started spending the money in your mind. They then come in and they spend a year doing due diligence, a year. And every time you start trying to do anything interesting, they'll say, oh, look, I don't want you to start a new product because we need to get sorted on this. And by the way, can you kind of go back and give us all these receipts from 100 years ago? And like, they'll just take up all of your time. Basically just wear you down. And meanwhile, your sales are kind of going downhill because everything you're doing is just dealing with their silly requests. Then it kind of gets to at the end of a year, and you're basically at the point of telling them to piss off. And then they'll say, right, we're ready to do the deal, but your sales have gone down. We can't give you 10 million anymore. We'll give you 100,000 now, and we'll give you another million if you hit these targets over the next few years. And normally what's happened is by that point, you're so fatigued, you're so worn out with the whole process, you just go, oh, take it, like just whatever. And so they end up buying these companies for next to nothing. Then they'll fire you, and then they'll saddle the company with a bunch of debt and fire your best staff and bring in try and systemize everything. But that's kind of the private equity playbook, which is, it's a bit brutal. But the point is that as a small business owner, if you start doing M&A, you can move a lot quicker because you don't need to be so mercenary as private equity does.
Absolutely. Let's dive into first-time founder challenges. What are some unconventional strategies that first-time founders can adopt to overcome the initial hurdles of starting a business?
Yeah, look, I think on the one hand, it's never been easier to start a business. It's it's so easy. Anyone with a credit card and an idea can buy a domain and get started. On the other hand, because it's so easy, there's so much more competition. I think where most small businesses and most aspiring entrepreneurs go wrong is they pour all their time and effort into producing the product, and they don't spend nearly enough time thinking about the problems of the audience that they're dealing with. And we're in a place now where, if I think about the last two businesses that I've started, what I did was I went out to the network, I went out to the world, and I said, hey, look, I'm thinking about starting this business. If you were going to do this, so if you were interested in a board seat, what would be the questions that you had? And from that, I got lots and lots of questions. I was able to run a couple of webinars and say, okay, like, answer those questions, dig into it a bit more, chat to people. What would this be worth to you? What would you like to, what are the things that you would really value? And then I could build the product around what I knew the audience wanted. And even then, I didn't actually build out the product. What I did was I said, okay, thanks for all the feedback. This is what I'm thinking of doing. This is how much I will charge for it. So I think at the time I said, look, I'm thinking this is a 1-year community product. I'm going to charge $5,000 for it. The first 10 people that come in can have it for $2,000, and I'll work with you in person to make sure we get you your first board seat. Let me know if you're interested. And I got those first, I think I had the first seven or eight people signed up pretty quickly, like in the first week or so. So I had like $16,000 to $20,000 already. I then had to build the product, but I knew that people were willing to pay for it, and from there I could kind of build the product, which is, on the one hand, it's a little bit harder because I kind of had to they had expectations, and I was trying to deliver on those. I was also trying to market to new customers while I was building out the existing product. But it was a lot easier than what I did a lot of at the beginning of my career, which was come up with a good idea, spend 6 months pouring my heart and soul into building this absolutely beautiful, wonderful thing that I thought was amazing and that nobody wanted to pay for. And I didn't know how to sell. And so, yeah, I kind of lurched from one failed product to another until I got to this point. And I think that's the beauty of the world we live in today, especially like if you think globally from day one. So many people out there, there's so many routes to connect to them. So many people have an interest. There's so many niches that you can really drill into and make money. So, yeah, I think it's a great time to be an entrepreneur.
How can first-time founders balance the need for rapid innovation with the challenges of establishing a stable business foundation?
You can't. There's nothing stable about rapid growth. It's just, it's like being in a pinball machine that's inside a washing machine. Like you're just lurching from, you win a client and you're ecstatic, and now you have to serve the client, so you're desperately trying to hire staff to manage it, and that takes you, because you're doing that, you're not focused on marketing, and so your leads dry up, and then you need to it's a crazy journey, and it's not right for everyone, but it's incredibly rewarding. I think the highs are higher, but the lows are lower of being an entrepreneur, and you have to be ready to do that. And I think really the only tip or secret I can add to that is you don't need to figure it all out yourself. Like having an advisory board, having mentors that you can go to, and people tend to overanalyze mentors. I think everyone kind of wants this Mr. Miyagi to teach you everything.
Mr. Perfect. Yeah.
Exactly. And it does, like, if those people exist, I've never met them, and B, they would be too busy to help me out. So what I think instead of I have lots and lots of mentors. Most of them don't know they're my mentors. It's just people that they're really good at one thing that I want to get better at. So I watch what they're doing. I try and learn from them, and I follow what they're doing. So I think you can, and look, some mentors have been dead for centuries, but I can still learn from them. So there's so much information out there. There's so many resources that you can call on. Yeah, so I guess my only thing is don't try and do everything yourself. Lean on other people for sure.
In what ways can entrepreneurs stay ahead of the curve when it comes to adopting and implementing new technologies in their business models?
I think actually, look, I mean, that's a very pertinent question with everything that's going on with AI. At the moment.
Yeah.
When I was a younger entrepreneur, I loved new tech, and I came from, so originally I was sort of a tech engineer in the backbone of the internet. I had a couple of businesses that were mobile value-added services right in the early days of WAP and 2G, and kind of built from there. And I loved new technology. It's not a great place to actually make money. The bleeding edge of technology is a very difficult place to make money. And I think you can kind of, because it's always changing, you can end up losing a lot of time constantly chasing the next new thing, and how can I improve this and how can I improve that? You look at some of the best businesses, or a lot of very good, profitable, cash-generating businesses, their entire CRM might be run on a spreadsheet. That they still use Gmail for doing all of their mail campaigns. Like there's so many good free tools out there that, I think you can. And it's an interesting question right now, and it's definitely an area where I think small businesses have an opportunity to overtake big businesses by utilizing AI more effectively. but you just need to be a little bit careful. You lose sight of why you're doing it. And remember that a business only exists to solve a problem for a client. Technology only exists to help you solve that problem quicker, more effectively, more efficiently. So make sure that you are chasing technology for the sake of doing that, rather than, oh, it's AI. I've got to learn everything about AI. You don't need to learn everything about AI. You need everything about your client's problem, and then see what is the best tools to help you solve that for them. So, yeah, it's easy to get distracted by the new shiny things, especially as entrepreneurs.
Great insights. How can entrepreneurs cultivate a culture of innovation within their teams to ensure continuous growth and adaptability?
Yeah, look, it comes down to the culture that you set from the top. And basically, we build the culture as entrepreneurs by who we hire and how we interact with them. And if you are naturally someone that's curious and you're constantly talking to your team about, hey, look, I've seen this company doing this. This is really cool. How could we integrate that into our business? Or you ask your team, what are you hearing from our clients? What are the biggest challenges that they're facing? How could we do something different? How can we light up their day today and really solve a great problem for them? If you're constantly asking those questions because you have a genuine curiosity, then your team will take their lead from you. And as long as they feel like they can come to you with ideas and you reward those ideas, not every idea is going to work, of course, but I think it's on you to create an environment where your team feels comfortable coming up with ideas.
I want to stay a bit on emerging trends and future predictions. How do you foresee the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning in the evolution of small businesses and startups right now?
Look, I think you've got to make sure you're not being distracted by the technology for the sake of technology. I'll give you a great example. I set up my first business in Asia was a mobile value-added services company. So I was trying to do things like text alerts on your phone. This is back in 2001, and SMS marketing and those sort of things. And I remember talking to a very successful woman who had a direct marketing team of about 500 staff, incredible business. And I remember I managed to get a meeting with her, and I was pitching her on mobile tech as being the future, and she could offer it to her clients and be a reseller for her and all this kind of stuff. And I remember I was kind of laying it on a bit thick about if you miss this wave, you'll be lost, and kind of all of that sort of young entrepreneur stuff. And I remember she said to me, "Have you seen our website?" And I hadn't even looked at their website. And I was like, "Oh yeah, it's good." And she's like, "No, it's not. We haven't got a website." And this was 2001, but by 2001, almost every company had or maybe
had a website. Yeah,
almost every company had. In those days, it was kind of like a brochure website, but it was, pretty much everyone had a website. And I was like, how can you not have a website? Like, everyone has a website. And she's like, yeah, everyone has a website, but I'm doing millions and millions in revenue, and I've got 500 staff, and you're the CEO of your company sitting there on your own trying to pitch me the future of mobile tech. Maybe it isn't tech that is the main issue here. And her point was, in her world, she knew all the clients. They all knew her. She owned that sector of the market. Anybody wanted to get into giving away demos in supermarkets or anything like that, they had to go to her. Her name was Lynn. And she'd cornered that market, and she didn't need websites. She didn't need mobile tech. She just needed to deliver. And the point was, she understood the problem that her clients had, and she knew how to deliver it. And she didn't need any new tech in order to do that. And it wasn't that she was a Luddite or didn't understand this stuff. She understood it. She just knew she didn't need it. It wasn't a priority for her business. So I think that's the thing that you need to be careful of as a startup or a young business is not being enamored by the tech. Always start with the problem that you're solving for the client. And is it a big enough problem that they will pay you cash? Figure that bit out and then use AI or use whatever else to help you scale it. But if you try and figure out the scaling up bit before you've figured out the problem solving bit, you're just going to waste time and effort.
What book or books are you giving most as a gift and why?
I give away a lot of my own books. So my last book was called Boardroom Blueprint. So that's about how you get your first board seat. The book that's most useful, especially for early stage businesses, is a book I wrote about 10 years ago, which is called Progressive Partnerships. And that's really about how you scale using partnerships to grow. And if you go to callumlaing.com, stick your email address in, you can get a free copy of that. So yeah, I give away a lot of those books. The books that other people's books that I give away a lot of, anything by Daniel Priestley. He's a very close friend of mine, and so his books keep us oversubscribed. All of his books are awesome. And then for anyone that's interested in corporate culture or business culture, there's a book called Legacy by James Kerr, which is all about how the All Blacks have maintained one of the highest win rates of any sporting team over the last 100 years. And that's a really, really good book around corporate culture. So I've given that to a lot of people as well.
What are 1 or 3 books you read that influence your life?
So many. I'm a fairly heavy reader, and books at sort of different stages of my journey. I remember Richard Branson's original book, Losing My Virginity, was a huge influence on me in terms of kind of thinking of what's possible. When I read Daniel Priestley's first book, Key Person of Influence, I actually ended up helping him launch that business in Asia. And so I had to become incredibly familiar with the content. But that, again, it's a great book. So I tend to read different books at different times. When I was really learning about mergers and acquisitions, some of the most exciting M&A happened in the 80s. And there's a book called Billionaire, which is about Sir James Goldsmith. I think it's out of print now. It's like this big, weighty tome that goes right into the depths and details of how he structured these incredible deals, which anybody else would find incredibly tedious, but I loved it. So yeah, it just kind of, and I go back to a lot of these books when if I get stuck in a particular problem and I think, okay, I remember reading about that 10 years ago. Let me go back and find that book again.
Can you recall a moment when a failure, either yours or your parents or friends, unexpectedly set the stage for a future success? What is the story behind your favorite failure, and how did it become a pivotal moment in your career?
I have an awful lot to choose from. Yeah, look, I've had so many, and I think what's interesting is that the early ones are the hardest ones. Mm-hmm. So when the dot-com boom burst and telcos stopped spending money, it was a bad time to be a recruitment company selling to telcos. So that was tough. And then I had a number of businesses in Thailand in 2007, 2008, the global financial crisis. And 2 of my biggest clients went bust, owing me over $1 million each. I ended up having to lay off 38 of 42 staff, and that was just brutal. Got in debt to a lot of people and took me years to kind of get out of that. The first company that we took public, we got attacked by some basically white collar crime, and that company crashed. I actually talk about that in one of my books, Entrepreneurial Investing. I talk about how we destroyed basically 250 million euros of shareholder value was destroyed in less than a year by that. And I write about that in the book. And when it was during COVID, that book got published and a whole bunch of copies arrived at our house. And so I kind of unboxed it, all looked good. And then I got a call, and I went into the other room to take the call. And my eldest daughter, who at the time was about 10, sits down and starts reading the book. And I just hear this, "Mummy, did you know Daddy had lost $250 million?" And she didn't know that until that moment. So, yeah, I'd forgotten that my kids got old enough to read these things now. So, but yeah, look, all of these failures you learn from, and you build contacts and build resilience and move on to the next thing. So I'm not sure I have a favorite, but they're all valuable.
Imagine you have the chance to put up a billboard in the heart of Times Square with a message for millions to see. What would your message be, and what do you hope people take away from it?
Well, if it's for the wider market, then I'd kind of be kind as a useful guide for life. Be kind, work hard is always a good philosophy. If it was for entrepreneurs, I think for entrepreneurs, I would say talk to more people. Yeah, stop trying to do everything yourself. One of the things one of my mentors said to me many, many years ago is, like, if you ever get stuck, rather than trying to figure out how to get unstuck, start asking who questions. Like, who has already done this? Who knows the answer to this? Who would benefit if I succeed in this? And when you start asking those questions, it opens up a whole bunch of doorways that previously, because if you ask how questions, like, how do I fix this problem? You either don't know the answer, or you just try and bluff yourself, and yeah, it's not a good outcome. Whereas asking who questions are much more useful.
For a passionate young entrepreneur fresh out of college, ready to dive into the real world, what unconventional advice would you offer to help them stand out? Additionally, what common myths about entrepreneurship should they completely ignore?
I would tell them to go and get a job. Don't be an entrepreneur. No, I'm joking. Although, look, I actually do think that there's a huge amount of value in working for other people. I think especially working for small businesses and early stage businesses when you're young is a great opportunity. Because if you go straight into entrepreneurship, you really don't have any learning to build on. Now, I mean, there's YouTube and there's lots of other resources and podcasts like this that you can learn from, but nothing will compete with being part of a small dynamic team that's learning together. So yeah, I think that's a useful trick. And again, try and find the customers, solve the problem before you build the solution. That's the biggest problem I see with a lot of young entrepreneurs is that they come up with an idea and they're enamored with their idea, and so they build the next app or the next, whatever it is, and they haven't really tested it on the wider market. And
it happens to me. It happens to me. I just think about something and say that this one will be great. Spend months building it and nobody use it.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's so easy nowadays to try and get people to place a forward order. That's and ultimately the sort of the market research I used to do, like yourself probably, is I would come up with this idea. I'd go and ask my mates, and I'd say, "What do you think about this?" And they go, "Yeah, it's a great idea." And I go, "Would you buy it?" And they go, "Yeah, definitely," because they're nice. They don't want to spoil me and burst my bubble. And then I'd go back to them 6 months later, and I go, "Look, I've poured all my life savings and work and effort into this. Blood, sweat, and tears. Will you buy it?" And they go, I've got no money this month. And that's always an excuse. And so what you realize is there's no value to people telling you it's a good idea. The only value is when they actually give you cold, hard cash. That's the only time that they actually see the value in your idea.
Callum, as an entrepreneur, maintaining personal health and fitness can often be as crucial as managing a business. Can you share how you integrate fitness and well-being into your busy schedule, and what impact do you feel it has on your effectiveness as a leader?
Yeah, look, it's my number one priority. It's in my calendar. I've got 2 or 3 people that put have access to my diary. None of them are allowed to move my gym time or my fitness activities. So I think I think it's just essential. And I think there's different types of exercise that are useful. So I wrote an article for the Next Web probably about a decade ago and saying, like, there's exercise. So there's sort of three types of exercise that are very useful for entrepreneurs. One is doing things like running, cycling, swimming, where you can just focus on one idea. So if you've got a question that you're struggling with, like running is it's like a meditation. You just try and figure out the answer to that question. The problem is, as entrepreneurs, we often get stuck in those loops of just constantly trying to figure something out. So you also need to do a sport that takes you out of your brain. So I play football every Saturday morning. I play five-a-side football. I do Muay Thai. It doesn't matter how big a problem you're wrestling with. When you're chasing a ball or when somebody's punching you in the face, like you have to be in the now. And so you forget everything else that you're worrying about. And that's really, really important. And then the third one, I think, is just kind of any sort of weightlifting or body fat analysis, something that you can control and you can't blame anyone else for. So if you think about entrepreneurship, there's a few things that you can control, but most of it is outside of your control. Like how clients behave, what's going on in the economy, all these things are completely out of your control. And it can be very daunting and you can feel quite overwhelmed with that. What I like about going to the gym and lifting weights is I get better because I show up and I lift those weights. And if I don't, there's no one else I can blame but myself. You know, if I start fasting for a few days because I want to cut down my body weight, yeah, that's on me and I get the results of that. And I can't blame anyone else if I kind of fail to do that. And I think it's quite useful for entrepreneurs to just get back that control. Your body is something that you have control over. So yeah, those are kind of the three things that I think are quite important for entrepreneurs to think about.
Absolutely. I called running my therapy session. I do Muay Thai and weight lifting too. Thank you, Callum, for sharing your insights and experiences.
It's my pleasure. I hope people get some value from it. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Entrepreneurship Unboxed. We hope you found Callum Laing's insights as inspiring and actionable as we did. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Don't forget to share this episode with fellow entrepreneurs and business enthusiasts who can benefit from Callum's wisdom. Stay connected with us for more raw and insightful conversations with the brightest minds in business. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries, embracing challenges, and unboxing your entrepreneurial potential. I'm IJ, signing off.